say something of importance to you in return. As Alexis mentioned, I'm speaking about a book, Comfort in the Wings, that I wrote and published in 21, and then it was a good enough experience and my own interest in the characters as well as readers' interest. I've since written a sequel, Wonders in the Waves, and published that almost a year to the date after the first one. So that was an interesting observation that I sort of realized once I started talking about the two books that I could have done an anniversary edition or something if I thought of it sooner. I am very, very, very comfortable being interrupted for questions. It doesn't bother me. As you'll hear in my bio, I was in higher education for quite some time, so I was used to having 20-year-olds interrupt every sentence I ever tried to string together, so I can keep rolling pretty easily. So if something comes up that you'd like to ask about, I prepared a few thoughts to share, but I'm also happy to talk about other things or expand if that helps all of you or if that's of interest. So I'm pretty flexible.
Can I ask?
Absolutely.
So was Love That Will Not Die, was that your first book? Because your
Yes.
Comfort in the Wings was inspired by Love That Will Not Die.
Right. They both start out with a novel inspired by, and this one is Love That Will Not Die, and then this one is Love That Does Not Die. So sort of thinking that it will not, and then being affirmed
So is that
that
a
it
book?
does not.
Love That
No,
Will Not Die?
that's my subtitle.
Oh,
That's a
I see.
subtitle.
Okay.
Yes.
So this was your first book?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Yep. You had it right. I'm sorry that the subtitle was confusing. My editor actually thought I should just use the same subtitle. I don't think so. Anyway. A couple of words about me because it gives you some context, and then, but only a few because it's the book that we're interested in, I guess. I grew up in Rochester. Alexis, somehow it made it on the program that I was a Canandaigua author. Right? That's stretching it a bit. I'm on the Victor Fairport line, but I'm close. Yes, very close. So definitely local, but not technically Canandaigua. For my professional career, I was a physical therapist and then went into higher education, teaching physical therapy, and was the program director at Nazareth College for about 15 years. Always an avid reader, loved the idea of writing, but of course as a mom, a working mom, a mom who went back to school for more degrees, the writing in a creative way never really never really rose to the top of where my time was going to go, right? But I did a lot of academic writing. I happened to, when I was doing my dissertation and afterwards, my research was all in an area called, a type of research called qualitative research. So the method I enjoyed the most was interviewing people and understanding the commonalities in their stories. And so I did some storytelling through academic and research writing, but still hadn't gotten to this path yet. Then between 2014 and 18, I experienced multiple unexpected losses of immediate family members, including two of my children, 3.5 months apart. A younger brother, parent, but for some reason, I think maybe the proverbial straw that broke this camel's back, My dad then passed away in 2018, and I said, I just can't work for anybody else anymore. I am just done. Retired from higher education. Started assisting my son in running a family business. But people kept saying to me, Jenny, you really like to write. Why don't you write a survivor's guide? You've been through so much. Write a survivor's guide. I toyed with that idea. I even had 20-some chapter headings. They were all a little bit sarcastic, cynical, and bittersweet, I have to admit, and decided that was probably not the right writing path for me. And besides, I thought, I can't tell anyone else how to survive. That's kind of my whole point, and it is you can't tell people how to survive. And so somewhere around 2020, it struck me that maybe I could make up fictional characters and say the important things, the things that were important to me around loss through fiction, give a voice that isn't often in fiction, I don't think, or at least I had not read anything similar. And I realized that as I started telling my story and talking about the things that I might like to try and include in the book, excuse me, I clearly have a sore throat here going on or something, or allergies being back from Florida up here, there's difference, I don't know. People started telling me their stories and opening up to me, and so the characters in Comfort in the Wings are truly a conglomerate of people I've met, my own experiences, my imagination. And I came to really admire and think about this quote, and I'm not even sure I know how to say the gentleman's name correctly. It looks like Neil Gaiman, Gaiman. Fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over and over. And that has resonated with me ever since I read it and think about it often as I'm thinking about my writing. So the book, Comfort in the Wings, much of it takes place in the Finger Lakes. So for those of you who have not read it yet, just curiosity, who has read it? Okay, just two. Okay, so I have to be careful of spoilers, right? And so you too. Much of the book takes place in the Finger Lakes, so if you choose to read it, you might enjoy some of the references to the beauty of these waterways that we're blessed with, and that the main character and her friends find tremendous solace and beauty in being in the Finger Lakes area, and it was a real joy to be able to pay tribute to a place that has brought me and my family so much enjoyment over the years. And as a note, in the second book, it is also a place that has brought great joy to me. It's a waterway in Florida on the southeast coast, a very unique lagoon area that's just rich in nature and wildlife and so forth. So that theme of being near water and water's healing effects continues through. Other themes, certainly grief and loss, and I think sometimes that might be a bit of a turnoff. People say, I don't want to read anything sad, life's hard enough, I want to read happy, and I get that. But there's a lot about the juxtaposition, I would say, of sadness and grief, but being joyful and grateful in spite of those things, and finding joy in very small things. The cover suggests that there's comfort in butterflies and birds, things with wings. We often hear cardinals, right, as a sign of someone we've lost is nearby. Well, the main character finds many, many, many signs in nature, and that brings her a great deal of comfort. The idea of another juxtaposition is being in crowds and feeling very alone. So that idea that sometimes your feelings are so deep and you feel very alone with them. You're in crowds, but unknowingly there are people in those crowds who share and might be a possible connection. There's a lot about connections and reconnections. The main character connects back with people that she had not had contact with in quite some time. And the connections are her friends and her family of friends who stand by her during difficult times. Another connection is that the main character finds a lot of comfort in connecting with her lost loved ones through a psychic medium, and feeling that she is really speaking to her daughter that she has lost and other important loved ones. And so that connection, a reconnection, however it's best characterized, also comes into the book. Yes, ma'am?
Excuse me. In writing something like that, were you able to interview people's experiences in connecting with loved ones who had passed, or had you listened to those stories? I was very interested how you said that I perceived it a good listener. You heard what people were saying. So, were there stories that you were told of those psychic connections to past loved ones? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're not. No, I gave you an open invitation. No, I've realized there's a great pun on an open book, right? First were my own experiences. So
I didn't want to ask that so
that's fine.
personally.
I had a very unique first exposure to a psychic medium, and I'll try and make it brief. I do tend to get very detailed. I guess it's the story time. But having been trained in a scientific profession, I thought it was all. I had never thought that there was anything believable about the whole idea of a psychic medium. So that was my mindset. But 6 weeks after my son died, and my son had, some of you may know Powder Mill Park. My son drowned at Powder Mill Park while he was fishing. And about 6 weeks after that, there had not been one thing that anybody had done, said, that helped me. I just didn't want to hear any comments. Nothing helped me. And a friend of a friend, who apparently had gone to psychic mediums quite routinely, and she was in Syracuse, and she was at a reading, and the medium said to her, "Do you know a young man, someone relatively young who has passed? He's very adamant. He wants to comfort. He wants to make connection." And she said, "No, I really don't. I don't know what you're talking about." Went on a little bit more with the reading. The same thing. The psychic said, "I'm sorry that I can't seem to stop this particular young man from wanting to connect. Are you sure?"
Very persistent.
Very persistent. She said no again. The psychic said, it's something about water. Something he hit his head, or something in water So she came home from her reading and was sharing with her family and some other people there, and her daughter. And the lady and her daughter's father were no longer together. The daughter says, "Mom, that's Daddy's friend's son." So they told me that, and I said, "I'm going. Like, when's her first appointment? I'm going." So that was when my experience started. And then again, it's one of those things when you start talking about it, other people then do tell you their stories, their experiences. And I was just struck by the comfort that it offered at a time when nothing else comforted me.
So did you and your son connect when you went to that?
Oh,
Or
yes.
is that in the book?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. At one point, the psychic said to me, "We don't always do this, but I don't think I can do his questioning and the things he wants to say to you justice by being sort of, I'm just going to say what he's saying. I'm not going to interpret." Thank you. This woman started speaking just exactly like Jason, including, bad language that a 29-year-old would use, and, his crazy expressions, and it was like Jason took that woman over. I'm getting chills again just thinking about it. And then my mother had also been gone for a while at that point, and she would, the psychic would look at me as I'm looking at you, and when she was talking to Jason, her eyes would go up. When she was talking to my mother, her eyes would go down. My mother was this tiny little thing, and my mother was talking about things with my father that only she would have known. So I don't have to understand it. I just know how it made me feel.
Thank you.
So, and I've probably had 10 or a dozen experiences now myself.
You're receptive to it.
There was only one that I kind of felt, was this a little, I felt more like she was trying to give me advice and be my counselor, and that's really not why I was there. I'll go to a counselor when I need that, But, so I know that was kind of a long response,
No,
but yeah. So I mentioned friendships that endure, friends that truly become your family, those people who really stick with you after loss. Not always who you expect it's going to be. I'm sure others have had that happen, and I really wanted to honor the friends in my life. So the main character has two very close friends in the book, and I often have people say, "So is Isabel Diane?" It's a conglomerate, but yes, I guess sometimes they see some of the characteristics that come out. A couple of other things about the book structurally. At some point, really quite late, I decided to include a quote at the start of each chapter that, in my mind, it sort of matches the content, helps the reader maybe get the essence of the chapter. And someone told me, I've loved it. People kept telling me they loved it, and this one woman said, "It's like when you go to a yoga class and they suggest that before you start, you set an intention for what your yoga session, what you hope it will be like." And she said, "I feel like every time I start a chapter, you're giving me the intention for that chapter." So, as I said, that was kind of a last minute decision, but I was very pleased and happy that I did that and that others seemed to appreciate it. I did continue it in the second book as well.
This is kind of on the same topic, so
Sure.
how did you come book. And I'm like, I'm gonna try to read some of it. Well, then once I started reading it, I couldn't stop, and I wanted to finish it.
Well, thank you for that.
And, that was like on my list of things to bring up to discuss with you was I love the books. And like, how did you find them, or like, how did you do that?
Another, I think it's an interesting story. So as I said, it was quite late in the game that I decided to do that. In fact, the editor was already editing the book, and I brought it up to her because, again, I am such a novice. Like, listen, I was a physical therapist. I could help you walk, but so I said to her one day, I've had this idea lingering, and I'd like to know what you think about it because I really respect your opinion. I'd like to put a quote at the start of each book, or of each chapter. What do you think about that? And she was quiet for a minute, which made me wonder, because she's usually quite chatty. And she said, well, I like the idea, and I've seen that done effectively. She said, but you've got 34 chapters. Where are you going to come up with 34 quotes? And I said, oh, Mary, not a problem. I've been collecting them forever. And so really, not forever, but since all of the loss and the things that had happened in my life, when a quote caught my eye, I'd usually snap a picture of it with my, usually be online on Facebook. Or now there's an email you can get called Inspiring Quotes Daily, so now I get that. But so most all of them I had. The tricky part, but it was kind of a fun game that I played with myself, was matching them to the chapter content, because I was going back and doing this. So, but it kept me very busy while I was nervous over her editing, so in a way it was kind of a good technique. And so I did the same thing with the second book. I waited till it was off to her for its first round of editing, and I thought, now I can keep myself busy with playing with the quotes again.
That has gotta be incredibly hard, because like that's your baby, you created that, and you're giving it to somebody else to change, like, oh my gosh, that had to be hard.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I don't feel that my life prior to that I had ever really focused on my creative side. I was a helper, and I was a facilitator and a teacher, but not necessarily focusing on creating something from a more artistic. And it was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. And then the idea of putting it out there, and what does anybody think? And I had two friends that I knew I had to get some feedback before I got all the way through. So I sent it to them, but they had to pledge, and it took me weeks. They had to pledge that they would let me know if it was, I said, you can't let me put something out there that's horrible. So you have to agree to be honest with me. Don't just tell me it's good because we've known each other for decades. That's not gonna work. You'd be throwing me to the wolves. So thankfully, they were willing to do that. And
How did you find your publisher, and were you surprised that your book was recognized, your very first book was recognized by Goodreads? And I thought, oh, this is impressive, I'm gonna make sure I get there.
I'm my publisher.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah.
I have gone the route of being an independent author, self-published, and also coming from academics, self-publishing in academics is frowned upon, because you're basically trying to help yourself get promoted and achieve tenure and so forth. So I had to sort of get over this hurdle that this is a whole different ballgame. But I did try the traditional route, which is sending letters. Basically, you're cold calling a writing sample of a different size. Each one wants to know different things in the query letter. The best, the comparison in my mind is if you're writing college applications and you're writing 20 of them, and one is a major research institution, and one is a Nazareth, and one is a Finger Lakes community, and so you're writing very, very different letters to each one. And so it was writing these different query letters and sending different samples, and then according to all the authors' blogs I've read, and some will never answer you, some will take 6 months, some like it. And after about a month of that, I said, Jenny, you're 65 years old, you don't have time for this. This is just, and I'm sending them off to, 20-somethings in Manhattan, and they wanna look at vampire romance, I think, I don't know. So,
They wouldn't have.
I thought it was just self-certain, pardon me?
I don't think those 20-some or even 30-some would have developed the insight, they haven't lived long enough yet to really grasp the meanings in your book.
Right.
They haven't read like kitchen table wisdom or anything like that. You see what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? So, and the other thing, you don't see the parallels that I do in your career as a physical therapist and your writing. Having undergone physical therapy and being a college professor in a different area,
Mhm.
I see it's all about development and listening. Like the physical therapist listens very carefully. Am I in pain? Will ask. Are you feeling pain? Very sensitive. Good physical therapists
I
are
was just
very
gonna-
sensitive.
yes.
Really. And so I do think that your life is very integrated. It's not in separate categories or channels. I see it really as a whole, and I think you have the foundation to as a basis for writing the books that you're doing. That sensitivity was there.
I really appreciate you, like I said, I get one out of this. I'm touched, I'm touched. And you're right, I always did say to my students, some of your faculty members are going to primarily teach you how to use your hands. Some are really gonna be teaching you the facts and the information using your head. I said, but I hope that I can teach your heart to be a really compassionate PT.
You were there already.
Yeah.
Are you gonna write another book?
Yes.
Good.
I wasn't sure, because I've got other ideas. I perhaps like to write some nonfiction. I've always thought it would be fun to write a children's book, but I need to find somebody who can illustrate, because I can't.
I can give you the names of those.
Terrific.
I'm 84, and I've lived a full life, so I've met all these
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
people, and
Interesting.
she illustrates children's books.
So I had dabbled a little bit with a third one with the same characters, and I had gotten to kind of, not stalled out exactly, but I just wasn't sure if that's what I should do with my time. I don't know, I wasn't sure. And then I came upon a writing workshop retreat in Iceland in June, and
They have them locally, you know. Yeah, who doesn't want to go to
And so it was, you had to submit a writing sample and 3 or 4 short essay questions, your goals and why Iceland, and I don't know, a couple of other things. And I was doing that in December, and I thought, well, I was writing it, I wasn't going in December. I was writing this application, and I thought, well, maybe this, one of the things I put in the application was that I think being immersed in writing and with other authors and with the instructors might help me sort out, do I want to do another novel in this series? What else could I do? So when the email came that I was accepted, and it's in June, I thought, well, now I've got to submit 2 5,000-word pieces, one for the instructor to review and give one-on-one feedback, and then one for your cohort of other authors to read. And I thought, well, it would be stupid to submit something I've already written and published. I better get rolling and write something new so that I can get this wealth of feedback on this retreat. So it got me going. It was sort of just the jab I needed to. So I'm going in June.
Oh, okay.
We'll see, we'll see.
Someone advertised the other day on Facebook that was in Sitka, Alaska. I sent it to my sister, who is a blog writer, and she goes, I don't think I'll about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very different places.
But Iceland had kind of been on my list anyway. One of a really good friend at Nazareth College, she's a religion professor there still, and she has been to Iceland many times. And I had always thought, well, one of these times Corinne goes, I'm going to tag along. So now I'm going on my own. We kind of hit on the things that I had intended. Are there any other questions? Do people usually do a reading for you? I could certainly read a little piece if that would be something that you're interested in. Yeah. And I always have, I tag like 5 of them, knowing that I'm never going to read them all, but which one will I feel like at the moment? So at this point in the book, the main character, Larissa, is still fairly early. This is very early in the book. She's just started to have these realizations that things in nature bring her great pleasure, and she does a lot of walking and observing. And she has, on many consecutive days, seen cardinals, and a friend alerted her to the idea that, you know, that could be a message from a lost loved one. She'd never heard that before. So she's about to go on her walk, but her friend stops by, and she doesn't quite know how to tell her friend that she really wants to go on her walk. And so the friend asks to go along, and that's fine with her. So they're out walking and they've been walking for a bit. They sit down to take a little rest, and the friend asks, so where's your cardinal this morning? I hate to admit that we'd twice circled by the place I usually see it, but no flashes of red appeared. Maybe I should only come alone. The cardinal is absent, and I'm sad to say this out loud. Just as I finished telling Renee this, she touches a finger to her lips, points to a spot on the other side of me, and says, shh, look at that butterfly. I turn to where she's pointing and see a monarch flitting among some bright purple flowers, phlox I think, right next to us. We both watch quietly as this delicate creature with the characteristic lacy orange and black pattern makes its way from blossom to blossom. As we contentedly watch her perform her graceful dance, she stops and alights on my knee. I sit as still as can be, totally entranced by her gentle manner. Too soon, though, she goes back to the flowers, makes another circle around us, and makes her way on to the next set of flowering shrubs a few paces away. Neither one of us can speak at first, but Renee breaks the silence to offer, you know, I read once that although butterflies are considered to be so beautiful, they're not able to see that beauty themselves because of the way in which their eyes are positioned. The saying goes that some people are like that as well. Everyone else can see the beauty, but the person never does. This concept definitely describes Emma. Emma is the main character's daughter who has passed away. This concept definitely describes Emma, and tears escape from my eyes. Before I say anything else, Renee continues, I remember thinking of Emma at the time I read it, the most beautiful young woman, but never a conscious thought from her about that beauty. I nod in agreement until I find some words. Renee, I was disappointed at not seeing the cardinal, but today, Emma spoke to us by way of that butterfly. This time, it's Renee who nods silently.
Very nice.
That did just remind me of, the reading to you reminded me of one other thing that might interest those of you who had an interest in the writing process. After several months of the book being available on, typical online retailers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so forth, in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle ebook, many people had asked me about doing an Audible, making an audiobook, and actually Linda Mazer asked me that first. And I hadn't really thought about it, and I looked into it briefly, but it appeared to me to be extremely expensive, and I thought, I don't know if that's worth it. But then a local couple who had also done an audiobook on a memoir about their daughter, they said, we know the perfect person. He lives just 2 miles from you. He's got a full production studio, and you could read it yourself. I was like, okay. So I dove into that one as well, and that was a fascinating but exhausting experience, really exhausting. You can imagine your voice would be tired, but everything was tired because we did about 2.5-hour sessions. So you're focused for so long, your vision, my eyesight isn't great to begin with, and you're trying to concentrate, and then it was like I was living it all over again. It was very emotional. And then I still found, even though it had a separate editor, a separate proofreader, I still found things in the reading that was. So what I did was I was about ready to submit the second book for editing. I stood at my kitchen counter and read the entire thing to myself in order to pick up mistakes so that I didn't send it off to the editor that way. So I haven't decided if I'm going to do the second one or not.
And how did you find your editor?
A friend who'd actually been a physical therapist and faculty member with me years ago at Ithaca, she had published a nonfiction book. It's about gardening, and it's the links between gardening and different personality types. And so when she published it, as excited as I was for her, the book was beautiful, I also just wanted to pick her brain. So how did you do this? She essentially had interviewed, I want to say 10 or close to it, people who considered themselves book guides, so to speak, or book shepherds, another one said, where they provide services like editing and proofreading, and some do the graphic design and setup and so forth, and then they lead you through the rest, sort of how to set it up and get it off to entities like Ingram Spark is where most libraries and bookstores buy their distribution company. So Angela had interviewed 10 people and picked this woman, and the book was beautiful, and I thought, let's see. So that was another very intimidating experience. Mary asked me to send wanna say about 50 pages to her. And that then we would sort of have a mutual interview, her of me and me of her, after she had assessed these 50 pages. And she not only did the technical things, grammar and wording, but she also looks for story, editing and consistencies and all of those kinds of things. And then looks to see how you accept the feedback or not, to decide if it's worth her time. Also, how long did it take her to edit those 50 pages? Because from that, she could give you a better cost estimate and schedule her own time better and so forth. So those 50 pages were off with Mary for probably 5 days. It felt like 5 years. And then she was very willing to work with me, and it turned out to be a really such a learning experience for me. She and her husband and daughter have a business where she does the editing, the daughter is a proofreader, and the husband does graphic design and color and font and all of those things. So they were the book shepherds for me, the book guides. But then the second one, my neighbor in Florida did the artwork. She did, yeah. So this one, the first one, we worked with images we found online and adapt them and modify them. But this one is an original pastel.
They complement each other.
That's what we hoped for.
Sure.
A couple of people did suggest, well, why don't you have Sarah go back and do the first one now, so they're totally consistent. I don't know, I'm kind of attached. It was my first effort. I mean, Sarah would do a beautiful job, but can't we make it consistent enough with font and sort of the tempo of the words, so to speak? So.
I was gonna say, in terms of loss, which is the theme in both books, adoption jumped out at me. And
Yes.
that's something I think we haven't quite discussed
Yes.
today, and I found that very absorbing because it's just so, adoption is so personal to so many people, individuals and families. And
I agree, and once I started writing, I thought there are so many kinds of child loss, right? There's all kinds of any loss, right? But the main character was experiencing child loss. But then there are others. There is pregnancy loss. There is putting a child up for adoption. There might be a child who's estranged and doesn't come home or communicate. And I started thinking about all of that. And a woman who had been my administrative assistant for 8 or 9 years came to see me right after my son and daughter passed away. And we were talking. She remembered Abby really well. She'd been at Abby's baby shower. We were just having this very sentimental conversation. And she ended up confiding in me. Here I'd worked alongside her for 8 years, and then I'd known her for about a total of 20. She said, Jenny, I never told you this, but I was pregnant at 15, and my parents made me put that child up for adoption. And she said, there's not one day that I haven't thought about that child. And that story stuck with me. So that's kind of, when I said early on when we were speaking that these characters are a conglomerate of my own experiences and others, this was this lady's experience that I wanted to honor in the book, because it is such another profound kind of loss. And it's explored quite a bit more in the second book, and so then I felt like I really needed to do my research, because I wasn't familiar from a legal perspective, and the reality reactions of the characters had to be believable and credible to people who had been through those experiences. So, yeah, thank you for bringing it up. I had it down. My eyes skipped right past it. Anything else? Yes.
So I would just share with the group that, I hadn't had the kind of losses that were in the book, like the loss of a miscarriage or a child. But I think, we all have losses in life, and I find I can still relate to grieving and loss, even though it wasn't parallel to the situations in the book, so, nothing that deterred me from reading the book.
I appreciate that. I mean, that was my hope, but you don't know if you achieve your goals until people share that. And I did have a very close friend whose husband had died just before the book came out, and she felt very, very much as if she could identify with that. So. Well, thank you all for being here and all your great questions, and I really appreciate your time. And the books, I have both of them with me if you're interested in purchasing them, but as I said, they're also on Amazon or any of the, I sort of have this love-hate relationship with Amazon, I have to admit. They make it a little too easy to use that as your fallback, but, and my business cards are here, so my website is there, and I'd love if anybody would like bookmarks. There's bookmarks from both books that you're welcome to have, so